Welcome, disciples of the internet. It's me, Mario. As you all know, I've recently recreated every single level of Super Mario World and Mario Maker 2, and this is a compilation of all 8 videos of that series. And I'm only going to say this once for the entire video. At the time of writing this script, only 15.4% of viewers are subscribed, so make sure to subscribe and toll the notification bell for more jelly-infused content. Our first world of the game is Yoshi's Island. Dang, deforestation really did a number on this place. Yoshi's house, technically the first level of the game. You may even wonder why it would be worth it at all to replicate it if it serves basically no gameplay purpose. Well, I made it anyway. You got your furnace, some apples, and the new addition of an end goal. Mario World also gives the player tips in the forms of these unique floating speaker boxes. Whenever there's one of these boxes, I just use note blocks as they both technically make noise. But in terms of power-ups and coins, there's quite literally nothing since the IRS got there first. Yoshi's Island 1, this seemingly normal level, does actually have a gimmick of taking normal vertical objects and tilting them, like semi-solids, pipes, and my neck. Mario Maker 2 has slopes, but only ground slopes, meaning that for semi-solids, strange hybrids needed to be made for each individual case. The next difference is evident. If you don't jump in the first 2 seconds of the level, Koopas can crawl outside their shells and just leave them behind. In Mario Maker 2, the Koopas will always have their shell before you jump on them, so they cannot really slip on slopes. At the top of this slope is also a Dragon Coin, which are basically the collectibles of this game. I could have used red coins, but that's boring. Instead, since there are 5 Dragon Coins in most levels, 2 of them will be 10 coins, 2 of them will be 30 coins, and 1 would be a 50 coin. The coins will be chosen based on which ones I think are harder than the others, and I will accept no comments about my coin placement decisions. The main enemy in this level is a dinosaur, since we are on Yoshi's Island, I guess. I used red Koopas to replace them since you technically have to bounce on them twice, and they also have red shoes. Trust me, it makes sense. Very quickly into the level is our first diagonal pipe, and these new versions look really out of place, and you can't even be shot out of them. Around these pipes are usually mini pipes, which remind me of a certain theme. Near the end is a problem that I rarely ever faced in Mario 3. Most of these levels are too long for one single sub-area, so usually there will have to be a big wall with a pipe about 3/4 of the way through the level. Right above the level is a moon, which grants the player 3 lives. Since there isn't a cape in this level, you won't be able to get up here anyways, but I still put 3 1-ups up there just for closure. The very end of this level is a charging Chuck. He and his variants appear very frequently throughout the game. The best possible replacement for him is Boom Boom. They look similar, and you have to stomp on their heads 3 times to defeat them. Yellow Switch Palace. This level is more of a commodity than anything else. You get some coins, stomp on a switch, and every dotted yellow block is filled in. And since there is no way to carry progress between levels of Mario Maker 2, these blocks will always be missing, so this level serves even less purpose. And since there are no invisible coins in this game, a few of them will have to be missed out on to prevent an obvious soft lock. The titular yellow switch itself is now 1/4 the size, and you are not even required to hit it in order to finish the level. Yoshi's Island 2, I personally thank this level for featuring no diagonal objects like the last main level. This is our first appearance of Yoshi, who is much less talkative this time around, as he knows what is coming and nothing he could say could stop it. At the second half of this level are some Monty moles that are now legally obligated to come out of the floor this time, and since the sub area is now near the end of the level, some small interlude sections are needed as there's no room in our first sub area. And in the sub area itself, there are some Koopas this time, just so Luigi can have something to throw at the question blocks. Yoshi's Island 3, now we're on to a mountain themed area, and thankfully the desert theme in Mario Maker 2 is also a mountain for some reason. I used chains and unstable blue platforms to try to emulate gravity as best as I could, and I didn't bother doing anything with the 5 block platforms as the chains could not fit all 5 blocks, and at that point it would just be obtuse. The lava in this underground section is now replaced with spikes because this level is also too long to fit in one single sub area. At the very end of this level is also one of these green blocks that give you a 1-up if you collected enough coins in the level. I don't really have a good way to test for that, so we'll just have to use the honor system. And if you break it, you are banned from the Mickey Mouse Club for inappropriate behavior. Yoshi's Island 4, the first main level that is short enough to fit in one sub area. The main area of this level is water, which means the jungle theme must be used, and this time it is actually a jungle. The semi-solids of this level are now mushroom platforms, but that is fine as there's basically no difference gameplay-wise between them. You may also notice the chains connected to the front and back at the bottom of the water, and that is so these giant spike balls do not just float to the bottom. This level is so short, it's kind of strange why they even bothered putting dragon coins here,
the first two are literally only 10 blocks away from each other. Iggy's Castle. There's not a single area of this level where the gameplay is preserved from the original. The first chunk has a bunch of chain-linked fences that the player can climb, so I had to place these chain semi-solids wherever they were in the original level, then put vines over each individual space. But there are also Koopas that climb on the fences, so Koopas have to be put on chains on the vines on the semi-solids. The next room is even worse since there are giant hammers that descend from the ceiling, so there needs to be even more chains and hard blocks, but since they load in at different times, it can lead to some wacky patterns. The boss of this level also takes place on a semi-solid platform over lava where the player has to bounce on Iggy until he falls off the ledge. A seesaw in Mario Maker 2 can represent the gravity of the platform, but now Iggy has no sense of self-preservation and sometimes just willingly jumps to his death. After tipping the axe, we have killed our first infantile reptile and can now move on to Donut Land. So that was the first 7 quote-unquote levels of Super Mario World recreated in Mario Maker 2. After I recreate the Star World, I'll give the ultimate ranking of every level just as I did in Mario 3, but for now, I will just rank every level in this world. Number 7, Iggy's Castle. Number 6, Yoshi's Island 1. Number 5, Yellow Switch Palace. Number 4, Yoshi's House. Number 3, Yoshi's Island 3. Number 2, Yoshi's Island 2. And number 1, Yoshi's Island 4.
Donut Plains 1 is important for the sole reason that it introduces the cape feather, which is basically one of the main gimmicks of the game. It's even on the front of the box. First way to get this power up is from the Super Koopas, particularly the ones that flash red. In Mario Maker 2 I had to trade out the cape for a pair of wings, so you cannot even get the cape feather in this level aside from the one in the sub area, but I'm getting ahead of myself. After a couple Super Koopas and a Charge and Chuck, there's a Volcano Lotus that acts basically the same as the Lava Lotus from Super Mario Bros. 3. So that means the return of the 3-headed Piranha Plant. In this pit with 2 Charge and Chucks is a unique block in Super Mario World where if you circle it just the right way, you are rewarded with a 1-up. You see, I found a very clever way to recreate this mechanic. I didn't. Flying up near the end of the level awards the player with their first alternate exit, which is quite literally impossible to replicate in Mario Maker 2. The best I can do is award the player with 3 1-ups if they find the place where the alternate exit is supposed to be. There are 2 sub-areas for this level, both of which are quite troublesome. The first is actually one they reuse quite a lot in this game, 5 rows of question mark blocks where if you choose the correct one you get a 1-up, but now in Mario Maker 2 you can test all 3 blocks, which kind of takes the chance out of this whole system. The second sub-area also has quite a lot of coins, and it is so long that a decent amount of it will have to be cut just so the whole level can fit in the 2 sub-areas I have provided. The way to reach these coins thus involves the player climbing a pipe with these wall run slopes, so the player won't even be able to access this giant coin section in-game. Donut Secret 1, the first water level. That's kind of it, there's not much else special. First enemy is a Rip Van Fish that tries to relentlessly chase the player if spotted. Dry bone fish do actually try to chase the player, however their fragile structure does cause them to crack after one single dash. The P-switch timers are so much shorter in Mario Maker 2, but in this case the player does have just barely enough time to get the key under these coins. Sub area doesn't have much else of note, but there are 2 dragon coins near the top, which makes the total number of dragon coins in this level 7. I made them both 50 coins as they are hard to reach anyway. Donut Secret House is a major problem. There are so many doors that I have no choice but to use 2 sub areas, and most doors will have to be replaced with pipes. The first enemies in this level are Boo Buddies, and in the shape of a ring, which is surprisingly in Mario Maker, but on a much smaller scale. There are also these eerie ghosts that move in a straight line, so of course chains will have to be implemented yet again. Get used to that. After this chained ghost is a massive 3x3 Boo called the Big Boo that can somehow be killed by Mario falling at terminal velocity. Giving a mushroom to a Boo makes them only 2x2 in size, but at least they can no longer be spin jumped on. The third area of this ghost house has the very first snake coin block that Mario can control via telekinesis. So far they aren't required for progression, so they can be ignored for now. What makes Donut's Secret House really special is the secret boss fight, which is cool since there's only like one in the whole game. In order to beat this unique Boo, the player has to pick up blocks and throw them upwards, and this is a major problem as the only surefire way to deal damage to these ghosts in Mario Maker 2 is with stars. But you cannot just give the player a star right away, as that would take away the challenge of the fight. So I put a P-switch at the bottom that the player has to jump off of, which will let loose a storm of stars from the ceiling, allowing the player to collect the key from the Big Boo. Donut Secret 2 is an ice level, meaning that everything is ice physics, including the semi-solids. Surprisingly enough, this is replicable in Mario Maker 2 if you set the theme to snow and change the time to night. Every piece of terrain you stand on is given ice physics. Other than the ice, there's not much else of note, but in the sub-area is the most useless P-balloon in the game. Donut Plains 2, after that long detour, we are now finally back to the main levels of Donut Plains with an auto-scrolling cave level. The second enemy we are introduced to this level is a new one, the Swoop. Spinies are good enough replacement as they both technically lunge at Mario from the ceiling. The main gimmick other than the auto-scroll are these moving yellow platforms, and since we don't want the player to fall under them, instead of hard blocks, bullet bill launchers filled with coins are utilized. It's a very finicky solution, however in some holes had to be plugged up with hard blocks. And for alternate exits to the level there are actually 3. One from completing the level normally, one from exiting the sub-area, and one from the secret key in the sub-area. Said secret area leading to the second palace of the game. Green Switch Palace has the exact same structure as the previous one big room and one corridor that leads to a switch. The first room has some Koopas to run over with their own shells. For the switch room itself, it puts some blocks blocking the entrance, so the player actually has to step on the switch to finish the level. Donut Ghost House starts off with a whole entire ocean of Boo Buddies that will swoop down on the player's location. So of course the most logical solution is even more chains. The player flies over this area, they can find the alternate exit and even more Boo Buddies. The player will literally never be able to access this spot since there's an escape feather in this level, but I built this area anyways. The rest of the ghost house is kind of boring and features differences that would have already been seen before, but there is this green luminescent room that features a snake block that yet again leads to nowhere. Top secret area. There are 5 question mark blocks with items that I already have in Mario Maker 2. The only changes are now the background is different and there is a starting platform and end goal. That's it. Only takes about 10 seconds to finish the level. It's impossible to die, and you cannot carry power-ups between levels. So while this level is pointless, it's probably going near the top of the list when it comes to accuracy. Donut Plains 3, a simple level when it comes down to exits and sub-areas, with there only being one exit and the sub-area being the one-up minigame I discussed earlier. For the main level itself, there are a near insane amount of chains, as the whole gimmick for this level is platforms. Mario Maker 2 thankfully adds the feature of adding on-off blocks and chains to sort of divert the tracks. And some of these tracks are some fuzzies which are no different from small spike balls on chains. Even though there are so many chains, there is no chain interference except for one fuzzy at the very end, but that doesn't take away too much from the level as a whole. Donut Plains 4 is a level that is very similar to Yoshi's Island 1, even bringing back the diagonal pipes from said level. The very start of the level is a yellow shelled Koopa, along with blue shelled Koopas later in the level. Whenever there is a special Koopa variant like this, red shells work just fine. Standing atop these flying blocks are the amazing Flying Hammer Brothers. Yes, that's their full name. Flying blocks in Mario Maker 2 can support giant hammer brothers, but they will keep flying to the left and never stop. So whenever they are required for progression, one-way doors can be used to get Luigi over these walls. Donut Plains 4 is also the very first appearance of these roulette blocks that give the player either a mushroom, a star, a fire flower, or a cape feather. Since the player can't have any random decisions in which power-up they get, I actually just rolled a 4-sided dice to see which power-up I would put in the block. This time, it was a mushroom. Morton's Castle. The majority of this level is vertical, but before that section are some diagonal conveyor belts and some thwimps, which are basically just mini thwomps. Chain chomps without their stumps are quite useful for representing them as they are the same size and also make tiny jumps. The second area is a pit of lava that is now at a much lower level, but if you fall in this pit you're pretty much dead anyways. Vertical area has a lot, and I mean a lot of moving blocks, so there needs to be an insane amount of chains and hard blocks that are surprisingly easy to get squished between. After the first few blocks are made, the game will stop you from using any more chains. However, a lot of the moving blocks near the end of the area are not required for progression. It does make the level feel a lot more empty, however. The boss fight against Morton takes place in a cramped room where Morton will climb on the walls and try to land on Mario. In the Mario Maker 2 version, Morton will instead jump and spawn fireballs, and won't stop Luigi or Mario from destroying the castle with Morton inside. At this point, I assume you know the deal, but if not, it's now time to rank every level from Donut Plains in terms of how accurate they are to the original game. Number 11, Donut Secret House. Number 10, Morton's Castle. Number 9, Donut Plains 2. Number 8, Donut Plains 1. Number 7, Donut Ghost House. Number 6, Donut Plains 4. Number 5, Donut Plains 3. Number 4, Green Switch Palace. Number 3, Donut Secret 1. Number 2, Donut Secret 2. And number 1, Top Secret Area. This time we are in Hellhole, West Virginia, also known as Vanilla Dome. The third, well, island of Super Mario World. Ignoring the few levels on the surface and this random house, the majority of this world takes place underground. Vanilla Dome 1 starts off with a row of 5 swoops, and if you haven't seen the last video, I replaced these creatures with spinies, so it is most possible that you will take some points of damage while trying to traverse this area. For these open Koopa shells, I have now made the decision to use empty Buzzy Beetle shells as it does really fit the theme. Just make sure not to put it on for peak authenticity. Entering this pipe leads to a cool sort of cinematic sequence where Mario needs to run on this yellow platform before it fully sinks into the lava. Ignore the lava that is now replaced with spike blocks, they basically serve the exact same gameplay purpose. And within said lava are some blars that jump out of the lava. You know what also jumps out of lava? Lava bubbles. Just ignore the spikes again. What I did for the moving platform itself is quite obvious since it takes up a lot of the screen. I put some bullet bill launchers on a copious amount of tracks, but yet again they load in at different times, so they have to jump multiple times while moving to the end. But it does add some artificial tensity, so you know, trade-offs and such. The second half of this level basically is nothing new to add, but there is the new addition of the super steep slope. Just use a 2-block steep staircase. There's not too much lost if you forget the super steep slope. Vanilla Secret 1 is a vertical cave level, which is cool, but the enemies in this level are kind of vanilla! There are simply just a few Koopa Paratroopas and 2 Boom Boom / Chargin' Chucks, but there is a new platform technically with the springy vine that sticks out of the wall. Now that the springs are exposed, Mario can just take them off the walls, but surprisingly enough, this is helpful as they are required for this one jump as normal springs don't bounce you as far in Mario Maker 2 as they do in Super Mario World. Vanilla Secret 2 is situated on a green mountain and starts out with a bale of Koopa Paratroopas, and there are some that are obviously stronger than others as they can jump much higher, and no, I will not add tracks for every Koopa that jumps slightly higher. This level is also cool as it features Lakitu in a pipe. We got Lakitu in a pipe before we even got normal Lakitu. But all he does is throw spinies out of a pipe, which can just be accomplished by having a normal pipe that produces spinies by itself. One more thing that has nothing to do with recreating the level itself, but there is the best Chargin' Chuck at the end of the level. The Mitosis Charging Chuck. Vanilla Secret 3 is quite boring in a platform aspect because they're mostly just semi-solids and some coin arrows. There are also these dolphins, so yes, that means the majority of this level's creation time will have to be spent on track arcs with differing heights. There's also this one other creature than the dolphins with this one Porcupuffer about halfway through the level. I simply put a giant sheep at that location, but now that the player can simply bounce on their head, it makes the level feel quite lonely. Vanilla Fortress, the first secret fortress, which is basically just a shorter castle type level that ends with Mario making the rhinoceros 4 steps closer to being extinct. The first section of this underwater fortress has some bony beetles near the end, and not much is lost from bringing them back to life. For the spikes that fall, icicles are quite convenient, but they do look slightly out of place when compared to the other quote-unquote spikes. For the second area, I elected to use ground blocks instead of hard blocks because the game physically stopped me from using more hard blocks. The Reznor fight itself is also quite tricky as there is no real way to have a moving 2-block wide platform that can be hit from underneath. So instead of bumping the bosses off their platform, the boss fight revolves around spin jumping and throwing them against each other. For the bridge that slowly disappears, donut blocks are a fine substitute, and for the Reznors I used Goombrats as they don't have any special abilities and will not move off their platforms. And to make sure the player kills every boss, each boss will have their own key, and there will be 4 key doors that the player will have to enter before they can finish the level. Vanilla Dome 2, this level starts off with some water, so that means the return of the jungle sub-area, and since there can only be one stagnant water level, the player starts off in a massive pool of water. Before this water section ends, there are some Chargin' Chucks that can break through these rows of blocks. Boom Boom is not that strong, however, so the player will have to crouch jump through these areas most of the time. There is a secret sub-area that has the return of the ever-present ice physics, but because we only have 2 sub-areas, this area loses all sense of intrigue as the only advantage to visiting this place is getting 17 coins. Red Switch Palace, yet another Switch Palace, so you already know the drill. In fact, that made the interlude section in the beginning much more interesting since this level is so boring. The first actual room has 4 different kinds of Koopas, which is a slap in the face to the 2 simple Koopas that I'm provided, and of course the Switch room is the same as it's always been. Vanilla Ghost House, the first ghost house with no secret exit to speak of, and the normal exit isn't even that well hidden. There are only 3 doors in the entire level, and it's basically just a straight shot to the end. I guess you could say this ghost house is quite The
second room has another new enemy, I guess, with these big green bubbles that move in a sine wave pattern, so that basically means big boos on tracks throughout the entirety of the room.
The best kind of prize is a surprise.
Vanilla Dome 3 is a lot of content. The main level itself is quite long, and there are 2 sub-areas to go along with it. So for these sub-areas, they're going to have to be shortened and put near the ceiling of the level, because there's simply no room anywhere else. The main gimmick of this level is the Skull Lava platform, which is thankfully in Mario Maker 2, and for the slopes, they can be put on tracks. However, there's one problem: the lifts don't last for long, and they eventually fall into the abyss. But if you change them to blue, they don't have this problem. However, blue skull lifts are much faster and have the unintentional side effect of making the level much harder than it rightfully should be. Vanilla Dome 4 is a level composed of semi-solids and bullet bills that spawn in from every side. Well, I cannot just place bullet bills anywhere without cannons, and in sections where 5 spawn at a time, track interference would be impossible to avoid. So Lord forgive me for what I must do. Now the bullets are much bigger, but also much slower, so you know, trade-offs. And now since the skull lifts are much faster, this sub-area is now one of the hardest sections in the entire game. Lemmy's castle consists of both lava and water, so there is no choice but to have one section be in the castle theme and one section be in the jungle theme. After the fairly tame starting section with Magic Koopas, there's this long corridor of moving platforms that dip in and out of the lava. Because of length restrictions, most of the lava will have to be replaced with a multitude of spikes dipped in the water. And for every single moving platform, there'll have to be bullet bill launchers, of course, filled with coins set on tracks. The loading time for each platform also makes this section much harder than it needs to be, but at least the boss fight is slightly easier. Lemmy cannot dip in and out of the pipes, but that doesn't mean the fake Koopalings cannot. Said fake Koopalings are now substituted with red Koopas that actually help make the fight easier, as you can throw their shells at Lemmy for extra hits of damage. And after a typical 3 hits, Lemmy is not only burned alive, but Mario methodically destroys this entire compound with a hammer. I hope you've enjoyed the creation of all 11 levels in Vanilla Dome from Super Mario World to Mario Maker 2, and before the video can end, it is time for the ranking of the levels featured in this video. Number 11, Vanilla Dome 3. Number 10, Lemmy's Castle. Number 9, Vanilla Fortress. Number 8, Vanilla Dome 1. Number 7, Vanilla Secret 3. Number 6, Vanilla Dome 4. Number 5, Vanilla Dome 2. Number 4, Vanilla Ghost House. Number 3, Red Switch Palace. Number 2, Vanilla Secret 2. And number 1, Vanilla Secret 1. What is your favorite type of Mario level? Desert, jungle, ghost house? Mine's bridge. Butter Bridge 1. Starting on the top bridge of the pair, the Butter Bridge, we see our first instance of how these bridges refuse to conform to any safety guidelines. After the bridge tries for 4 blocks and just stops, there are some new platforms where if you stand on one side, the other side rises. One of the few mechanics that utilize gravity in Mario Maker 2 is the seesaw. However, if there's ever a situation where Luigi needs to pass through the middle of the platform, stationary semi-solids are necessary. This doesn't fix every problem though, such as this 50 coin that is now practically impossible to collect, especially with the auto-scroll. The only enemies in this first level are Paracoopas, both red and green, but in Super Mario World they don't always obey the rules of how red Paracoopas fly up and down and green Paracoopas always jump on the ground. It's inconsistent. So for this level, every single enemy has to be a normal red Paracoopa. Butter Bridge 2, the return of the Super Koopas, and since they are very important to the whole idea of this level, instead of just simply substituting them with Paracoopas, I created track arcs for every single flying Koopa in the level, and for the ones that grant a player a Cape Feather, they can be set on the same track one space behind the Koopa. Just before the checkpoint are some Koopas that insist on kicking away their shells at the player. It moves at such an arc that replacing them with a spike is not too crazy of an idea. The sub-area for this level features a long rope that the player can cling onto while moving up and down to collect coins. For some reason, vines are one of the few things in this game you can't put on a track, but the swinging claws are useful for delivering the player from one place to another. Sadly, it does make the gameplay a tad brainless as the player does not have much control over their position. Cookie Bridge area. Now on to the second bridge with only one level to its name. Super Mario World has a unique chainsaw-shaped saw. Now that the saw is much wider, it does make the saw generally a tad harder to dodge, but considering how much easier the last level was with the predictable Super Koopas, this is a forgivable trade-off. And since Mario Maker 2 is a lot more stingy with the shapes of its tracks, most tracks will be lacking in an accuracy sense. The rest of Cookie Bridge area contains much more ropes, which are now swinging claws, so I will instead focus on the sub-areas. The first one takes place during nighttime and is auto-scroll, and because of length restrictions, I'll have to remove both of these features. This sub-area also has its own set of 5 dragon coins, but because you can only have 5 special coins in one sub-area, one of them will have to be forgotten. But the most interesting part of this area is how you're supposed to access it with these special wings that you can only interact with if you have a Yoshi. So I replaced this question block with a key surrounded by hard blocks, so the only way you would reach it normally is with a Yoshi. And in this area, the Yoshi is given the ability to fly, so I gave the player a clown car as clouds usually disappear after a couple of seconds. But there is one problem: there's no way to access a Yoshi in this level without bringing one from another stage. And I just spent all of that time designing this sub-area, so I will just place this here and we will never talk of this again. The next sub-area is bullet bills that shoot in 4 directions diagonally, so I cannot just reuse bonsai bills again, so spike balls on chains it is. Cookie Bridge area is also the only level in this world with a secret area, one that demands a strategic Yoshi sacrifice. So the goal is not placed here, but rather at the end of these 2 pipes. Soda Lake is a rather simple level with just a few Cheep Cheeps and the addition of the Torpedo Teds, which are basically just bullet bill launchers that stick to the ceiling. Normal launchers don't have this ability, however cannons do, and there does have to be 2 cannons both facing different ways, as Torpedo Teds also have the ability to change their direction. However, even in a normal state, these cannons have a much faster fire rate than the TT launchers, so it doesn't take long for a copious amount of bullets to fill the screen. Coconut Mountain takes pride in its amount of semi-solids and Monty-Moles, and since not all of them can pop out of the ground, some get to do these little hops on these segments of tracks. Along with the moles are the Fire Sumo Bros, which yet again calls for Boom Boom. However, to replicate the spike on the heads of these enemies, I gave them a spike top crown, however it can fall off quite easily. Before I get into the sub area, I want to mention this unique flying piranha plant near the end of the level that can also spit some fireballs, so I put 2 normal plants next to the jumping one. Sub area features the return of the Porcupuffer, which I've been told a couple of times from the last video that putting a spiky enemy like a Spiny or a Spike Top in a cloud works better than a normal Cheep Cheep, mostly because they always stay at a firm point on the X-axis and chase the player relentlessly.
No matter how fast he ran, he could not escape the demon!
Ludwig's Castle, a gauntlet of 3 unique rooms, each with their own problem. The first is a corridor surrounded by darkness and 6 swinging spike balls, some of which are so close together that they will have to be moved around to avoid track interference. Also in this corridor is an insanely hidden fake wall that the player can traverse through in order to reach another 1-up minigame room. And now it is much easier to see where the gap in the wall is, which is a shame, as if you take this pipe you will miss the next major room. Welcome to the Chain Room, every block of which is covered in tracks and bullet bill launchers, except for this area. Since on-off blocks are only interactable with track intersections, I just removed the tracks here to give the illusion that the player hit the block and the ceiling receded. The third vertical area features the return of the chain link fences, so if you've seen the first video, you already know exactly what I do for those. The boss battle against Ludwig is actually quite simple, however Ludwig no longer does that cool backflip shell jump maneuver. After disturbing the local wildlife at terminal velocity, Mario and Luigi can now move on to the Forest of Illusion. I do genuinely hope you've enjoyed my recreation of the Twin Bridges in Super Mario Maker 2, and if you want to view any other videos like this, make sure to subscribe if you haven't already, but now it is time to move on to the ranking of these 6 levels. Number 6, Ludwig's Castle. Number 5, Cookie Bridge Area. Number 4, Butter Bridge 2. Number 3, Cookie Mountain. Number 2, Butter Bridge 1. And number 1, Soda Lake.
Look at that map design. It's literally just a strange looking circle. I don't know why future Mario developers even tried after this point. It's perfection. It's peak game design. It's peak fiction. Forest of Illusion 1. As you'll most likely know at this point in the series, the jungle theme comes pre-packaged with a moat of water at the bottom of the screen, barring any chance for bottomless pits to be featured in the level. But we in fact can have our cake and eat it too by changing the theme to night, which turns the water into poison that acts the exact same as lava. The only downside is that I no longer have the trees, so I created these nice looking decorative mushroom trees. And whenever a tree is in the foreground and not the background, I removed the ground blocks at that location and replaced replace them with the semi-transparent one-way doors, to give the illusion that these trees are set in front of the player. And for most of the level, the changes are purely visual, until the enemies begin to straight up break out of their boxes. You see, in Super Mario World, enemies don't comply to their yellow constraints, and tracks won't work to replicate this phenomenon, as tracks put enemies at a different layer than the ground. So the Goombas and Koopas just fall into the void. So for now, the enemies just have to rest in their boxes until the player lets them out. The secret exit for this level is usually accessed via a P-balloon, which is now basically impossible to achieve as the P-balloon doesn't wear out over time. So if you want to reach the secret exit that badly, you have to pull off an epic pro gamer cape feather move. Forest Evolution 2, typical cramped and slow Super Mario World water level. Its one claim to fame being the introduction of this basic urchin enemy that moves in predictable straight lines. And also this wishing charging Chuck, but I don't really care about his inclusion. The urchin itself is 2 blocks wide, which makes this one wide block track set these spike balls ever so slightly off center, which will never stop being mildly annoying to me. That's really all this level has to offer aside from the secret exit where you have to discern a semi-solid from the actual wall tiles, which is so much easier now that the semi-solids are much more dynamic in Mario Maker 2. Blue Switch Palace, finally the last Switch Palace, so I no longer have to recreate the same rooms over and over again. Super Mario World actually has 2 different P-switches that both perform different functions. The blue one acts like normal and turns blocks into coins and coins into blocks, while this gray one has this weird little gimmick where it turns enemies into these temporary gray coins. Since the purpose of this switch is to incapacitate all enemies in an area, I used a POW block to remove the spinies instead. And yes, I did spice up the exterior with as much blue decor as I possibly could. Forest Evolution 3, all of the enemies aside from this Charge and Chuck at the end of the level are trapped in these bubbles and pop out when they come in contact to any form of terrain. I gave every single enemy in this level parachutes as it enables them to move predictably, and they do stop once they come in contact with ground terrain. This level also features the hardest and most cryptic 1-up in the game, where you have to hit these 4 blocks in a specific order to be awarded with said 1-up. Now the 1-up only requires 1 block to be hit, but I'm not really complaining. It also seems that as levels go on, the secret exits are getting less and less creative. All you have to do is enter this pipe and at least have your super form so you have the weight to break these blocks and nab the key. Forest Ghost House, it only makes sense that the Forest Evolution would have its own Ghost House level, one that starts out with an odd tunnel section that leads to 2 massively open areas that makes the Ghost House feel like more of a ghost warehouse. This level has no new ghost themed enemies to offer, as even the Boo Ocean we've already seen before. The secret exit is also quite simple, as it is hidden like 10 blocks after the normal one. And oh yeah, obligatory Boo Buddies reference. Forest Evolution 4, rounding out the circle of main levels for this area, this one focuses on Lakitus both on clouds and inside pipes. And since some pipes spout out spinies faster than others, it doesn't take long for the player to be simply overwhelmed by enemies. This level is also home to one of those unique stretchy pipes, but as long as Mario can't fit down one of them, the hard block track routine works just fine. Like so many of the other levels in this game, this level is too long for one sub-area, and since one of the secret sub-areas in this level is underwater, I put blue dotted line blocks and put Cheep Cheeps on tracks to give the illusion of the player being underwater. And the concept of the secret area has now been stripped down to its base form. You don't even need a super mushroom this time, you just need to enter this pipe. For a secret area, I think the funniest thing about this level is how the background is constantly moving around, even if the player is standing still, which implies that the entire level, including the ground itself, is spinning at terminal velocity. This level revolves around the player jumping between platforms while dodging Paracoopas, and since you can't pass tracks through each other, one platform will have to stick near the bottom of the screen and one will always have to stick near the top. Past the goalpost are some 1-ups that are purely stationary and refuse to move, which is odd, but nothing that tracks won't fix. Forest Fortress, yet another secret fortress, one that starts off with the return of the hammers that try to crush you from the ceiling. Instead of using those inconsistent hard block platforms, this is now the skewer room, which I have been told is a better solution after I posted the first video. It does make the room a tad bit more dangerous now that the sides of the hammers are deadly on contact. What makes this room even harder is how the saws are now 1 block wider and taller, making the first room of this level a major difficulty spike compared to all of the other levels I've made so far. The next room is far more simple as objects that fall off tracks can be caught by other tracks. The quote-unquote secret exit of this level involves a frantic Cape Feather glide over a lava bubble infested moat. The reward for this feat is 9 whole 1-ups, which is kind of lame in Mario Maker 2 as you can only be awarded with 3 1-ups per level. And the boss fight for this level are the Resnors, who are exactly the same as any level they've ever been in. So I treat them with the exact same quadruple Goombrat and key door move. Roy's Castle, probably my least favorite level in this entire game, just because it features long snake block sections and nobody likes snake blocks. I switched the color of the snake blocks to blue to speed it up from the sloth-like green blocks, and since Mario Maker 2 puts a limit on how long a snake block path can be, some parts where the snake blocks travel backwards will have to be cut off. Skipping the snake block section leads to some Bowser statues that shoot slow-moving fireballs. My personal enemy pick to replace them is the blue Mecha Koopa, which resembles a Koopa, shoots a horizontal projectile, and is conventionally unkillable. The boss fight against Roy is also exactly the same as Morton's back in World 2. The boss arena does get smaller, and there are some clever ways to replicate that in Mario Maker 2, but there is no way to set it to where it gets smaller every time that you hit Roy, so I just chose to opt for not including it at all. So, you know, scratch yet another infantile reptile off the hit list. So that was all 9 levels from the Forest of Illusion represented in Super Mario Maker 2. Now that the in-depth recap of each level is finished, it is now time for the ranking of each level based on how accurate their new versions are to the original game. Number 9, Forest Fortress. Number 8, Roy's Castle. Number 7, Forest of Illusion 3. Number 6, Forest of Illusion 4. Number 5, Forest of Illusion 1. Number 4, Forest of Illusion 2. Number 3, Forest Ghost House. Number 2, Blue Switch Palace. And number 1, Forest Secret Area. Island or world of Super Mario World is Chocolate Island, but is it made out of chocolate? Is it the home of Choco Mountain from Mario Kart 64? If it is truly made of chocolate, does global hunger exist? You see, in this Mario Maker 2 episode, I'm asking the real questions. Chocolate Island 1, one of those simple grassy diagonal pipe type levels, but it does introduce these dragon dino enemies that this world likes to overuse quite a bit. They do have the ability to spit fire, but I believe the most important facet of their abilities is chasing the player down. So, Monty Moles it is, especially since their sizes also match as well. The sub area isn't too interesting as it just has the return of the Porky Puffer and some dolphins, but at the very end of this level does have something important as the explosive ability of the diagonal pipes is required to get the player across this gap. So I made a track arc with the winged blue platform for quick one-time horizontal transportation. Before advancing to the next level, I would like to make a quick mention about how some of the diagonal semi-solids will have to be drastically changed from the original to prevent all kinds of soft locks.
Connection terminated. I'm sorry to interrupt you, Elizabeth. If you still even remember that name, you have all been called here. Into a labyrinth of sounds and smells, misdirection, and misfortune. A labyrinth with no exit, a maze with no prize. You don't even realize that you are trapped. For most of you, I believe there is peace, and perhaps more, waiting for you after the smoke clears. Although for one of you, the darkest pit of hell has opened to swallow you whole. So don't keep the devil waiting, friend. This ends, for all of us, in communication.
Chocolate Ghost House. I would make the Boo Buddies joke now, but this first room doesn't have any Boo-related enemies to speak of, just some Eries and a dark reflection of that taunting 1-up Lakitu from the Forest of Illusion. So I gave this Lakitu the ability to throw as many lava balls as it possibly can. There are also some moving holes, and to fit the theme, I placed some giant Boos on tracks. It's not instant death like the holes, but it is better than nothing. The second room has some flashing lines of Boo Buddies that do the classic DVD logo bounce off the surrounding terrain. And since they follow the same direction as they are spawned in, you can make a line of winged fire bubbles without even having to use tracks. The second type of unique Boo is a rock type Boo that turns to stone whenever the player stares at them. Since you can stack enemies on top of each other, I put the unkillable flying Buzzy Beetle on top of the Boo's head so the player can easily stand atop the heads of the ghosts to reach the exit of this level. Chocolate Island 2 is one of the most complex levels in the game, so before I go into making it, I'll explain how it works first. Every time you enter a pipe in this level, you are taken to a different room depending on how you played the previous rooms. The first room is always the same, the second changes based on your coin count. 0 to 8 coins for a semi-solid Koopa area, 90 to 20 coins for some Rexes, and 21 plus coins for a long Cape Feather glide section. The third room is based on how much time you have remaining, 300 to 250 seconds for a secret exit and some Chargin' Chucks, 249 to 235 seconds for even more Dino Rhinos, and 234 to 1 seconds for a couple pools of water and 11 mushrooms, which is more than enough, as the most you could possibly have that would even be useful at a time is 2. The final room depends on if you have 0 to 3 dragon coins or 4, the second one giving you access to the final 5th dragon coin. Now for actually making it, I physically cannot do any of that, especially since there isn't enough room in 2 sub-areas for 9 different sections. So first off, I decided to cut the Paracupa section since it's boring and I personally don't like diagonal semi-solids, and I cut the secret exit area since they're useless anyway in Super Mario Maker 2. And for the different pathways, I made an easy path and a hard path, so you could take the path where you only have to glide over a pit and jump over some water holes, but then you wouldn't be a real gamer. Chocolate Secret is one of those very long levels, and of the 3 sections, one of them is vertical, and even that one barely fits in my small vertical sub-area. The first room of this level has 5 Chargin' Chucks, which exactly matches the max Boom Boom limit in Mario Maker 2. Which means for the third area, I'll have to use an enemy like a giant hammer brother instead, but I can't even do that, as the level ends too fast before I can do that. So I just placed one right after the goal. It makes it seem like I just scooted the end goal into the middle of the level. Chocolate Island 3 has a bunch of those spinning platforms that have some Koopas that stand on hard blocks that rest in the middle. And that's kind of it. There are a lot of differences, but precisely none that we haven't seen before earlier in the series. Even the secret area where you have to fly under the normal one to get the secret one is reminiscent of the one from Cheese Bridge area. Chocolate Fortress, now back to an actually interesting level. There are some pikes that are very similar to smaller versions of skewers. Since they are 1 block wide, I put some conventionally unkillable munchers onto the tracks, and for the ones that move faster than the others, I gave them wings. The next difference is a small one, but this world has this very strange quirk where instead of simply using lava, it uses this strange brown liquid. Like, what is it supposed to be? Molten chocolate, tar, potassium iodide? If this section wasn't weird enough, there are also some miscellaneous fireballs, so at that usual spot where they spawn, I put some red cannons on tracks to shoot at the player. The next room has some thwimps, and since they mostly move in predictable left to right patterns, it is now the classic put spike balls on some odd looking track arcs time. And the boss fight against Reznor is of course the exact same. Chocolate Island 4 has so many slopes that the entire level is covered with them except for the very end, because the end goal needs to be on flat terrain, but literally everywhere else is covered with slight slope inaccuracies. Along with the diagonal slopes and some diagonal platforms, which is probably the easiest part to replicate of this entire level, the vertical area is absolutely ginormous, so only about 75% of it can be made. The brick blocks on this level are already browned out, so you cannot just spin jump through them, so each brown brick block is now a P block, so the player has no choice but to hit the P switch to progress. And the sub-area has so many pipes that it actually exceeds the enterable pipe limit, so the final 2 are replaced with doors so the player isn't just soft locked if they hit the bottom. Also, since the slopes don't leave enough room for pipes, all of them are stuffed right here at the very edge of the level. Chocolate Island 5, after more brown brick blocks turned P blocks and another gray P switch turned POW block, there is this colorful row of shells all placed in a row. Why are they there? I don't know why, it looks cool. So for my version, I placed alternating spiny and buzzy shells all on this P block platform. After the checkpoint, there are some more moving pipes, and luckily you can't enter any of them, so the hard block track strategy is completely fine in this scenario. Also, this level just barely fits in one sub area. The only change is that I have to put these 3 boom booms directly behind the end goal. But now that I have finally one free sub area, I can actually add water to the sub area instead of using ice blocks. Yippee! Wendy's Castle, now it can actually use skewers for the intended purpose, except in Mario Maker 2 they cannot pass through solid objects, so some bits of ceiling will have to be removed. Other than the copious amount of skewers, that's kind of it for this room. The second one has some beta amps that circle around their platforms, and the chains being ever so slightly out of sync annoys me so much that they made the platforms just slightly bigger to accommodate for that. The boss fight against the Wendy is also basically the exact same as Lemmy's from Vanilla Dome, but with differing pipe heights, which makes the castle the easiest to recreate so far in the entire game. That doesn't take away from the fact that Mario straight up erases Wendy from existence though. So that was all 9 levels of Chocolate Island from Super Mario World represented in Super Mario Maker 2. Now that the in-depth recap is finished, it is now time for the ranking of every level in terms of how accurate they are to the original game. Number 9, Chocolate Island 2. Number 8, Chocolate Island 4. Number 7, Chocolate Fortress. Number 6, Chocolate Secret. Number 5, Chocolate Island 3. Number 4, Wendy's Castle. Number 3, Chocolate Ghost House. Number 2, Chocolate Island 1. And number 1, Chocolate Island 5.
Super Mario World is 7 worlds in the quote-unquote main campaign to defeat Bowser. Unlike the modern Mario games that include the Star World as a bonus 9th world, in Super Mario World the Star Special World is the 8th world of the game, which I will be recreating and is when I will be conducting the final ranking of every single level of the game. But the point of this explanation is how there are 7 Koopalings, but since there are also 7 worlds, Larry is pushed into the Valley of Bowser. Larry is a special video game character because I can guarantee that he's no one's favorite Koopaling. If you say he is, you're lying to yourself. Well anyway, time for more infant turtle slaughter.
You're ugly, you're disgusting, I'm gonna kill you.
Sunken Ghost Ship. Technically, before we can get into the Valley of Bowser, at the gate of this cave is a ghost-themed underwater level, which means I get to press the funny boo joke button. And since this level is underwater, the textures will be very out of place. Also, you may be wondering why I'm using the annoying night version of the underwater theme. 2 reasons: it fits more with the level gimmick, and the second, because the flashing boo party is definitely impossible to recreate, so turning the lights off balances the difficulty a little bit. Also, one little thing before the third vertical area, there are these crates that seem so much like they'd be semi-solids, but they just aren't. I was expecting there to be problems with these bullet bill cannons, but it wasn't until I played the level again that I even realized these somehow weren't semi-solids. The vertical area of this level is also the tallest in the game, and about half of it will have to be removed. And obviously in Mario Maker 2 there's no object that just instantly ends the level, so there needs to be another interlude section. Valley of Bowser 1. Like every other normal level in this world, Valley of Bowser 1 is cave themed and starts out with some giant Monty moles. Why are they wearing sunglasses when they live in an underground cave? Anyways, they cannot be killed, so whenever the game tries to utilize them as some kind of platform, I slap an invincible flying Buzzy Beetle on their heads. Just try not to miss, even slightly. Every charge and chuck in this level has the ability to break through blocks, and since there is no Cape Feather and the player is required to break through these walls, I erase the top portions of these walls, which could lead to some difficulty problems if the player is in their super form. Valley of Bowser 2. Remember in Donut Plains 2 and that level's insistence on those wacky yellow platforms that take up 90% of the recreation time? Well, now the entire level is one big moving yellow platform, so once I run out of bullet bill launchers, some sections will look very empty and lifeless. Valley Fortress. Ooh yes, the final fortress level. I'm so excited to recreate the exact same Reznor boss fight for the literal 4th time. But other than Reznor, there's really not too much to talk about. There are some skewers that move much faster than others, but that's one of those changes I really can do nothing about. This fortress is also the shortest in the entire game, which at least means I don't have to think about Reznor longer than I already have to. If Reznor is your favorite Mario boss, you belong in the same corner with the Larry fans. Valley Ghost House is special as it is the only ghost house in the game to literally introduce nothing new. I mean, there are some new background colors, but not much else. One point of interest though is the inclusion of this snake coin block returning from Donut's secret house, except this time it is actually required to get the player to a secret exit. So blue snake block it is. Since this is also the last traditional ghost house of the game, I also took the time to decorate this ending section a bit. Valley of Bowser 3. In this level the developers tried to put an athletic mushroom platform type level underground, so the texture textures are going to be doubly screwed in this one. Valley of Bowser 2 has a unique platform with these grassy slabs that drop when their internal number reaches 0. In Super Mario Maker 2, there is a unique platform that drops after a certain amount of time, and that is the Skull Lift platform. I could change the platforms to take longer to drop with a quick blue Skull Lift platform, but those never drop, which just allows the player to skip the whole entire level, and that's no fun. Small note, this level has a new bridge type platform that can also be made diagonal, which leads to this monstrosity. Valley of Bowser 4, for the final normal level before the final 2 cave levels, this one is actually quite tame. The platforming gimmick is a platform that falls when you jump on it. There has never been an easier substitution choice so far in this entire game. There are also quite a few charge and chucks, but thanks to this level having 2 sub-areas, all of them can be replaced with boom booms. Sub-area for this level also has that ever-present ice physics mechanic, and since there's water in this sub-area, the Cheep Cheeps are now frozen in a lake of ice.
Michael! Don't leave me here!
Larry's Castle. Out of all the mechanics to bring back for the final Koopaling Fortress, they chose the Snake Block. And Larry's Castle features the most annoying Snake Block section in the game that constantly doubles back on itself. Since the max Snake Block path limit is kind of short in Mario Maker 2, that means putting another Snake Block where the first ends. Larry's Castle is also basically the only level in the entire game with a secret checkpoint where you have to fall down this hole. But now in Super Mario Maker 2, the secret is kind of ruined since the scrolling stops when it comes in contact with a max height wall. But now that the scrolling doesn't stop, astute players will be able to easily tell that something's off. The second room requires the player to let Magic Koopas destroy these brick walls, so just make sure not to kill them or you're screwed. The boss fight against Larry is also the exact same as Iggy's except with 3 measly fireballs, which just reinforces my hate for Larry even more. They can't even create their own original boss fight concept. Bowser's Castle. I mean, technically this level is 2 levels called Front Door and Back Door, but if you're expecting me to create 2 levels for Bowser's Castle and Bowser's Castle but shorter, you will be sent to the corner. Looking at the actual level itself, Bowser's Castle has 12 whole sections, but thankfully I only have to remove 2. First, the Spark Room, because it has a massive ceiling and moving platforms that I don't want to deal with. Then I remove this vertical underwater moving platform area for obvious reasons that are obvious. And for the corridors with the numbered doors that take you to these sections, I shortened them by about 500% just so everything could fit. The Chain Room and the Hammer Room, really annoying mechanics, but nothing we haven't seen before yet. Then there is this Mecha Koopa room with semi-solids in the foreground, which is impossible, but technically the gameplay of this level is the exact same as the original, disregarding the textures. Room 5, or 4 in this case, is a dark hallway with some skewers and thwomps. The difficulty of this room is also non-existent since the skewers don't all load in at the same time. So if you start running at any time, you probably won't be hurt. Actual Room 5 has some more Bowser statues and some fake Bowser statues that jump towards the player. For the real one, I used red cannons, and for the fakes, I used Mecha Koopas. The final room is 8 charge and chucks, so every other one will have to be a Boom Boom, then a giant Hammer Brother. It can be inferred without saying, but all of these rooms will have to require many pipes and doors to connect them. And since one of these doors will have to be a key door for the final boss, for one of these connections, I was forced to use the good old-fashioned method of just using a tunnel. The penultimate room has a light mechanic. The best I can do is give the player a star if they hit the light blocks, because that's the closest thing I have to light without doing the night theme or wacky sound effects shenanigans. And the ninjas are now jumping piranha plants because they jump in place without having to move side to side. Now it is time for the grand fight against Bowser, and yes, it is more complicated than just putting Bowser in a single clown car. Trust me, there is a method to my madness here. Since the clown car is so violent in this game that it will instantly chase after Mario, there will have to be one-way doors to seal Bowser at the top. But now there's the problem of the bombs Bowser throws not passing through the doors. So now Mecha Koopas will have to exit these pipes here. But now the boss fight is too easy, so I put spike balls and upside down pipes to replicate the bowling ball attack from Bowser's second phase. And finally, if you accidentally jump into the ceiling of the level, I put some munchers up there to prevent being instantly soft locked. And sadly, Luigi is yet again too late to rescue Princess Peach, but at least he gets to chill at this mini recreation of Yoshi's house. So that was all 9 levels of the Valley of Bowser for from Super Mario World recreated in Super Mario Maker 2. Now that the in-depth recap of each level is finished, it is time for my ranking of how accurate each recreation is to the original game. Number 9, Bowser's Castle. Number 8, Sunken Ghost Ship. Number 7, Larry's Castle. Number 6, Valley of Bowser 2. Number 5, Valley of Bowser 3. Number 4, Valley of Bowser 1. Number 3, Valley Ghost House. Number 2, Valley Fortress. And number 1, Valley of Bowser 4. And in this finale, I will be recreating both the Star World and the thematically barren Special World. These worlds featuring levels from all throughout the Super Mario World spectrum, such as running out of cartridge space, bullet hell, and groovy. Star World 1, a fully vertical level where you have to break through an unnecessarily copious amount of brick blocks. 90% of this level is just spending time breaking through a large chunk of bricks, then moving on to the next chunk. So once the game stops me from using any more bricks, the best substitution is literally nothing, since the block limit stops you from using multiple other forms of terrain. One of the closest things the Star World has to a theme are these multicolored Yoshi eggs that grant the player with a baby Yoshi, which means I get to make a baby penguin reference, but sadly this mechanic is quite unreplicable. Star World 2 has the non-existent nautical award for being the most boring water level. There are absolutely no changes in elevation, and the secret exit is also quite obvious. This level would have been one of the contenders for the most accurate level in the game if it weren't for Rip Van Fish not existing in Mario Maker 2. Star World 3, as mentioned before, is definitely a level from the hit video game Super Mario World from 1990. There is a POW block, a Yoshi, a Lakitu, and a secret exit. Yep, this is definitely one of those really short, so they're technically super accurate by default type levels. So, get out of my face! Star World 4, another sort of boring athletic theme type level with Koopas being the only types of enemies. So it was actually quite accurate, but very boring. Star World 5, yet another level that makes me want to get to the Special World already. But at least there is a required snake coin block section, which means I get to use the wonderful snake block section for the final time. Also, the secret exit for this level is intended to be reached with all 4 colored block switches pressed, but nothing the game designers throw at me will stop me from showcasing my gamer skills. Now it's time for the Special World, a gauntlet of 8 levels that are ever so slightly harder than the average Super Mario World level. Gnarly, yes, that's the level's name. Every level in the Special World has a name that is just an adjective that is a synonym for way past cool. Gnarly is a mainly vertical level that features an ascent and resulting descent. Differences are abundant, just not a lot of new ones. You got the return of the Spring Vines and another amazing flying hammer brother, and at this point in remaking the game, the P-switch is less of a turn bricks into coins block and more of a make invisible stuff appear out of nowhere block. Tubular, genuinely one of the hardest levels from the original game. Tubular requires the player to continually grab P-balloons without being hit by all of the random projectiles on screen. Mentioned a couple times before in the series, the P-balloon in Mario Maker 2 is completely revamped from the original game, allowing the player to move with full 360-degree rotation and never wears out, so that sounds like a great improvement to the level, right? Sometimes, sacrifices have to be made for the greater accuracy. Clouds run out after a certain amount of time and makes the control scheme more accurate, more like Mario floating than driving a car. Way cool, the worst of the worst when it comes to chain type levels. There are around 10 chain junctions, and because of constricting space, most shapes will either be horribly disfigured or enlarged. The fuzzies are also quite fast in this level, so instead of using spike balls this time, I made the executive decision to utilize munchers with wings. Way cool is also the final level to use those Yoshi wings that lead to unique sub-areas. Thankfully, this is the only wing block level that actually has a natural Yoshi egg in the level. Also, I do recommend beating this level via the sub-area because these swinging claw sections are now practically impossible in this new version. Awesome is a nice level, so it doesn't live up to its name. There are some Rexes, which I've changed this time, so you actually have to hit them twice, and if the spike snowballs hit the bottom of the Rex stack, it gets faster, just like in the video game. Plus, there are some more frozen lakes in this level.
Michael!
Groovy! This section was going to be about how this level is quite boring, a grass level with the most interesting enemy being some volcano lotuses. But then I realized that this was a level from the title screen. I don't know how I didn't realize that until now. I built the whole level and didn't suspect a thing. It wasn't until I was writing the script that I looked at the level and was like, wait a minute. So yeah, cool title screen level. Other than that, doesn't really feel like this level belongs with all of the other Special World levels. Mondo, a rising water level, so that means the return of the day version of the jungle theme. In Super Mario World, if a Cheep Cheep isn't submerged in water, they'll actually flop on the ground. In Mario Maker 2, if a Cheep Cheep is above ground, they will start jumping from the bottom of the screen. So have fun dealing with all of this. Outrageous! This is just a Forest of Illusion level, but without a secret exit and with a new color palette. But this level does have a unique enemy with these fire embers that act like fire snakes, so I will treat them the exact way I did with fire snakes in Super Mario Bros. 3. This level also has a lot of those fire-spitting piranha plants. This isn't the first time they've appeared in this world, but it's the first time I remembered to talk about them. To save space, I put both fire piranha plants onto the pipes that the jumping piranha plants come out of, but even though it does save space, it definitely adds to the chaos factor. Funky, the final level and challenge of the game, and the game designers show their full hands with 7 fire sumos and 7 chargin chucks. The main difficulty of this level isn't the enemies or the platforms, but mostly the massive length of this level. But at the end of the level, there is a special message for the player. It does have to be shortened a little bit just to allow room for everything else though. So that was it. Every single level from Super Mario World recreated in Super Mario Maker 2. But before the final ranking, it's time for the Star and Special World ranking. Number 13, Outrageous. Number 12, Way Cool. Number 11, Funky. Number 10, Awesome. Number 9, Gnarly. Number 8, Groovy. Number 7, Tubular. Number 6, Mondo. Number 5, Star World 5. Number 4, Star World 1. Number 3, Star World 4. Number 2, Star World 2. And number 1, Star World 3. Yeah, every single level from the Star World is more simple than any moment from the Special World. Now a few more statements before the final ranking. In this ranking, doing every level side by side, some levels have become more favorable and similarly less favorable in my eyes, mostly because of 1 or 2 things that particularly piss me off. So I have made some scandalous level rankings. Without further statements, we begin with number 75, Bowser's Castle. Number 74, Donut Secret House. Number 73, Chocolate Island 2. Number 72, Wendy's Castle. Number 71, Morton's Castle. Number 70, Larry's Castle. Number 69, Outrageous. Number 68, Vanilla Fortress. Number 67, Way Cool. Number 66, Lemmy's Castle. Number 65, Valley of Bowser 2. Number 64, Iggy's Castle. Number 63, Sunken Ghost Ship. Number 62, Ludwig's Castle. Number 61, Donut Ghost House. Number 60, Chocolate Fortress. Number 59, Forest Fortress. Number 58, Chocolate Secret. Number 57, Vanilla Dome 4. Number 56, Roy's Castle. Number 55, Funky. Number 54, Chocolate Ghost House. Number 53, Forest of Illusion 3. Number 52, Vanilla Ghost House. Number 51, Donut Plains 2. Number 50, Forest Ghost House. Number 49, Cheese Bridge Area. Number 48, Valley of Bowser 1. Number 47, Forest of Illusion 1. Number 46, Awesome. Number 45, Valley Ghost House. Number 44, Chocolate Island 4. Number 43, Gnarly. Number 42, Vanilla Dome 3. Number 41, Valley of Bowser 3. Number 40, Tubular. Number 39, Valley Fortress. Number 38, Vanilla Secret 2. Number 37, Vanilla Dome 2. Number 36, Vanilla Dome 1. Number 35, Donut Plains 3. Number 34, Groovy. Number 33, Yoshi's Island 1. Number 32, Yoshi's Island 3. Number 31, Butter Bridge 2. Number 30, Cookie Mountain. Number 29, Donut Plains 1. Number 20, Vanilla Secret 3. Number 27, Star World 4. Number 26, Mondo. Number 25, Forest of Illusion 4. Number 24, Star World 1. Number 23, Forest of Illusion 2. Number 22, Butter Bridge 1. Number 20, Chocolate Island 1. Number 20, Donut Plains 4. Number 19, Yoshi's Island 4. Number 18, Star World 5. Number 17, Donut Secret 1. Number 16, Vanilla Secret 1. Number 15, Valley of Bowser 4. Number 14, Chocolate Island 3. Number 13, Chocolate Island 5. Number 12, Yoshi's Island 2. Number 11, Star World 2. Number 10, Soda Lake. Number 9, Blue Switch Palace. Number 8, Donut Secret 2. Number 7, Forest Secret Area. Number 6, Red Switch Palace. Number 5, Green Switch Palace. Number 4, Star World 3. Number 3, Yoshi's House. Number 2, Yellow Switch Palace. And number 1, much to my dismay, Top Secret Area. I hate this place. If you've just got here, or if you've been watching this series from the very beginning, or if the end of this video randomly appeared on your TV out of nowhere, I would like to thank you from the bottom of my soul for watching me go through this recreation process and the final ranking. But of course, that's not all. If you'd like to play any of these levels, or if you would like to play the Super World I made based off the original Super Mario World, you can search up the Mario Maker ID for my second Mario Maker 2 account currently shown on screen. And if you want to view more content like this, or if you just want to see more jelly-soaked sleep paralysis demon fuel, stick around.